Yo, what's up? It's T-Dog Reviews. We got the new mic, we got Naruto Uzumaki in the building, and today, if you couldn't tell already by the title and the thumbnail of this video, we're going to be reviewing none other than Naruto Volumes 1 through 72, the complete series of Naruto. Now, going into the series, I actually didn't reread any of Naruto or anything like that, but I have, of course, read all 72 volumes, and I've seen probably most of the anime, so I feel like I'm well versed enough in Naruto to make a full review on the series, and I feel like there's probably a lot of newcomers to anime and manga who probably haven't read all of Naruto, so I kind of wanted to cover the series for people who haven't read it yet. So for this video, I'm basically going to be splitting it into 4 major parts. First, I'm going to be talking about the story, and then I'm going to be talking about each of the box sets, because I think each of the box sets contains a very distinct portion of Naruto. I mean, the first box set, Naruto, literally contains all of Naruto Part 1, and then box set 2 is where Shippuden starts, so yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty good way of going about this. Now, I should probably mention that I'm going to be keeping this video mostly spoiler-free. I mean, at least with the first 48 volumes, probably when I get to the war arc, I'm going to be spoiling it like crazy. So, if you haven't read all of Naruto, you might just want to stop watching when I get to that part. But for the most part, it's going to be relatively spoiler-free. Now, I'm pretty sure most manga fans know the story of Naruto like the back of their hands. I mean, I think most people, even most people's grandmas know what Naruto is. But I think a lot of people just getting into manga, and some people who really just read shorter manga, might not really know a ton about Naruto, besides that it's about ninjas. So basically for this video, I'm going to be covering the story enough to where if you don't know much about Naruto, you're going to get a general gist of what it's about. But I also don't really want to give a humongous plot synopsis on what it's about, because I feel like most people probably already know what Naruto's about. And also, you could probably just do a Google search if you want to know more information about the series. So the story of Naruto starts off with a boy named Naruto Uzumaki who has the nine-tailed fox demon sealed within inside of him. Now, the reason this is so significant is because the nine-tailed fox demon actually destroyed basically a good chunk of his village, as well as the 4th Hokage, when he was basically born. And in order to make sure that the nine-tailed fox demon didn't go on a big rampage again, they, of course, sealed this demon inside of this kid. Because what else would you do? So early on, Naruto is pretty much looked down upon by everyone in his village because they see him as the nine-tailed fox demon, because he has the demon inside of him. They don't really see this kid as Naruto, they more just see him as the human embodiment of the nine-tailed fox demon. Now, of course, Naruto isn't actually the embodiment of Kurama, the nine-tailed fox demon. He's just a kid named Naruto, and he doesn't even really know that he has this thing inside of him. But lucky for him, this beast inside of him named Kurama actually gives him some pretty cool powers, and he teams up with some people in his class, Sasuke and Sakura, and with his 2 buddies and his teacher, Kakashi, they go on a bunch of crazy ninja missions. Also, Naruto's main goal throughout the series is that he wants to become the Hokage, and this basically means that he wants to become the leader of his village, Konoha. And at the start of the series, this is very much a selfish goal of Naruto's, and it's pretty clear that he really just wants to achieve this goal so he can rub it in the face of the people that look down upon him. But as the series goes on, Naruto really learns what it means to become a leader. Now, Sasuke, of course, has a lot of goals of his own. I mean, he wants to kill his brother Itachi, because Itachi basically killed his entire clan. And of course, Sakura has some goals of her own. I mean, she wants to, let's just move on. Now, when Naruto first starts off, it's very much introducing everything. Introducing these powers, this world, and pretty much the structure of Konoha. And I think that's fine, that's to be expected. That's usually what happens at the start of a manga series. But I honestly think on reread, because I actually did reread the first volume of Naruto, I think on reread the intro is a bit of a drag, just because I know the beginning of Naruto so well that I feel like I didn't really need to reread it. But if you're going into it for the first time, it's probably fine. Where the series really gets crazy though is in the Land of the Waves arc, where Naruto and his buddies get sent out on a mission and they have to fight two guys named Zabuza and Haku. And I don't really want to talk too much about this arc because it's really only in the first 4 volumes of Naruto, but to put it simply, it's probably one of the best opening shonen arcs ever. But I think where Naruto goes from being pretty good to really good is definitely in the Chunin exams arc, because this arc really introduces a great cast of characters. You know, we've got Rock Lee, Gaara, Neji, and the list just goes on and on. I mean, pretty much every character introduced in this arc that continues through the other arcs in Naruto is a really great character. And honestly, I think this is where they have some of their best moments to shine in the entire series, because some of these characters really take a back seat later on in Naruto. Now, pretty much whenever I talk with people about Naruto, they say their favorite arc in Naruto Part 1 is without a shadow of a doubt the Chunin exams. And I think the Chunin exams is a pretty great arc, but I think the best arc in Naruto Part 1 for me would definitely have to go to the Retrieval arc. And I'm not going to say the whole title of this arc because it would kind of spoil some stuff, even though I think most people probably already know where Shippuden goes. But I think one of the reasons why the Retrieval arc is so great is it brings so many things back from the Chunin exams that were great and makes them even better. For instance, Choji has probably one of his best moments in the entire series in the Retrieval arc. I mean, of course, Sasuke is great in this arc. And oh man, Gaara comes back in this arc with probably one of my favorite fight scenes in the entire series, which is, of course, the Gaara versus Kimimaro fight. And it's just an incredible fight. I mean, seriously, one of the best ways to end off Naruto Part 1. Obviously, it wasn't the final fight in Naruto Part 1, but it was definitely one of the best. And overall, I think Naruto Part 1 is just a really incredible way to start off a series. And I think it's really well read in the manga because it's really just one manga. It's all Naruto. Whereas with the anime, some people watch it and they're like, oh, I don't really have to watch Shippuden because that's a sequel. It's not part of the same series. When, no, that's not how it works. It's all part of the same series. It's all Naruto. So after this, we get into the second box set content, volumes 28 to 48. And honestly, this might be a hot take, but this is probably the best content in Naruto. And I know that might be a bit of a hot take because there is some really great stuff in the first 27 volumes of Naruto, but honestly, I think the first half of Shippuden, volumes 28 to 48, is the peak of Naruto. Now, admittedly, I do think that the beginning of Shippuden could have had a little bit of a stronger arc, but by no means do I think the Sasori arc is a bad arc. I mean, some people pretend like the Sasori arc is the worst time skip arc in all of manga, and that's just simply not the case. I mean, I think this is a pretty incredible arc. It's definitely not as good as some of the other stuff in Naruto and some of the other stuff to come in the other 20 volumes after this, but I mean, to start off the time skip, it really is not a bad arc. What I really like about these volumes of Naruto, though, is this is where the Akatsuki is really fleshed out. And the Akatsuki is pretty much the group that Sasuke's brother Itachi is part of. So obviously those are pretty much all the main villains of Naruto, and probably the best villains in Naruto. And I also really like how in this portion of Shippuden, a lot of really great powers are introduced. And it doesn't really feel like there's crazy, over-the-top power-ups like in some of the later parts of Naruto. I think in some of the later parts of Naruto, it almost gets a little excessive with the power-ups. But in these volumes of Naruto, I think most of the power-ups feel really well placed and well deserved in the series, especially the Sage Mode, which I think is probably one of my favorite transformations in Naruto. Now, I think the two best things about these volumes in Naruto would have to be the final Itachi arc, which I think is called the Fated Battle Between Brothers, the Sasuke versus Itachi arc, which is basically the pinnacle of Sasuke's journey in the series. And around the same times when that's going on, you also get the Pain/Nagato arc. And I think that's an incredible arc too, and it's really interesting to see how Naruto and Sasuke basically have their own two best arcs in the series. I mean, Naruto has the Pain arc, which is pretty much his time to shine, and Sasuke has the Itachi arc, which is basically his big moment in the series. And I honestly think that this would have been the perfect spot to end Naruto. If Naruto basically just went to its conclusion after the Pain arc, I think it could have been really incredible. But I think the series just drags on way too long after this, and it definitely feels like a little bit of a letdown considering all the crazy stuff that happened before it. Because before the stuff after Volume 48, it was pretty much just going uphill. I mean, sometimes it would go down a little bit with the sorcery arc, but overall, I mean, it was just steadily going up. And this is where I'm gonna get into a little bit of spoiler territory, so if you haven't read all of Naruto, you might want to save this video for later. Now, the reason this feels like it could have been the end of Naruto is because it feels like both Naruto and Sasuke pretty much completed their goals at this point. I mean, at this point in the series, Naruto is pretty much renowned by Konoha as being the savior of the village, and at the same time, I mean, Sasuke killed Itachi. So it's pretty much a win-win situation. And honestly, after I finished volume 48 of Naruto, I was kind of wondering how they were going to follow up on that, because it kind of seemed like most of the big stuff in Naruto was already told. And to say the least, I definitely think that pretty much everything after Naruto volume 48 feels pretty dragged out, even though I definitely like some of the content in there. So right after the Nagato arc is pretty much the Kage Summit arc. And I don't think this is a horrible arc at all, but it's just really not super entertaining. I mean, this arc was honestly kind of a snooze fest to get through, but there was a big crazy fight between Danzo and Sasuke, and I honestly think that fight made the arc worth reading. And honestly, if it was just the Kage Summit arc and a few adjustments here and there, and then it went to the conclusion, I probably would have been fine with that. But the amount of volumes after the Nagato arc is really just ridiculous, and it gets to the point where it gets so slow and so drawn out that some of this content really just feels like filler in the manga. Now, a lot of people basically consider the war arc to be a bunch of smaller arcs that add up to be part of this big portion of the story, but honestly, I just consider this to be one huge arc. And to be completely honest, there is no reason whatsoever that this arc needed to be a third of the series. I mean, honestly, that's just ridiculous. Now, I think that once both Naruto and Madara Uchiha are in the war, it actually gets to be a pretty decent arc. But before this, it really wasn't that fun to read at all. Now, I think that there are actually a few things in the last third of Naruto that stops it from being completely horrendous. For instance, I think Obito Uchiha is one of my favorite characters in the entire series, and honestly, if I was making a list of my top 10 favorite Naruto villains, he would probably be number one. I honestly think that Obito Uchiha is my favorite Naruto villain in the entire series, and honestly, I think that's one of the main reasons why I didn't completely dislike the final arc in Naruto. And I know a lot of people hype up Madara, and he was a pretty cool character too, but honestly, he just kind of seemed like a typical Naruto villain, whereas Obito seemed like a character that was kind of always around and kind of always foreshadowed. I mean, at the end of volume 27 with the Kakashi backstory, he was in there, and especially in the manga, it's cool how he was hinted at from that early on in the series, because I'm pretty sure with the anime, they actually don't even introduce that Kakashi backstory until pretty late into Shippuden. And of course, Kakashi has some great moments in this final arc, and his fight between Obito is seriously one of the best fights in the entire manga. I also really like the huge backstory with the first Hokage, Hashirama, and I honestly think it's a lot more important than the whole Kaguya and Chakra backstory that they were trying to tell. Because honestly, I think that story fell kind of flat. Now, I think one of the most controversial parts of the end of Naruto would have to be the Edo Tensei. And this is basically where they brought everyone back to life. It was the reanimation jutsu. And I think some of the characters that they brought back to life were pretty good. I think the fourth Hokage one, and of course the Hashirama one, and I guess the second Hokage one too, but I mean the second Hokage really wasn't that interesting. But basically there were definitely a few characters that I think benefited from being brought back to life. But there were definitely a few other characters like Zabuza or Haku, where when they were brought back to life towards the end of the series, I honestly thought that was a pretty bad move because I think that their deaths in the series were so well done, and I honestly think their Edo Tensei scenes really weren't that well done. Honestly though, I actually really like the Itachi Edo Tensei scene. I mean, when he was first brought back to life, I was actually kind of annoyed about that just because his death scene in the series was so impactful, but there were definitely some loose ends with Itachi that were tied up at the end, and I think this was a really good way to do it. I just didn't think it was necessary to do that with all the characters in the series. I think maybe if it was just done with a few really important characters or a few characters that needed some extra time in the series, it would have been a pretty good way to do that. But I definitely don't think that bringing back all the characters to life was a good move at all. Now, overall, I think it'd be kind of hard to give a score to all of Naruto. And I usually don't really give scores in general, but I think with Naruto, it's such a long series and it's such a classic series that it kind of deserves a score. So I'm actually going to be giving 3 scores for the series, 1 for each box set, and then I'm going to be giving 1 overall score, which I use combining and dividing all the other scores. So for the first box set in Naruto, I'm going to have to give this one a 7 out of 10. And for the second box set, I mean, it's the best part of Naruto, so I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. And finally, with the third box set, this one, wow, this was a tough decision, but I'm going to have to give this a 4 out of 10. Now, don't get me wrong, there were definitely some really good scenes in the last third of Naruto, but overall, it really just seemed like a pretty lousy arc with a lot of cool moments in it. Now, I'm no mathematician here, but a 7 out of 10, 8.5 out of 10, 4 out of 10, I mean, we add it all up, divide it all up, we get a 6.5 out of 10. And that appears to be the final T-Dog score for all 72 volumes of Naruto. So overall, that's pretty much it for this video, guys. If you enjoy, make sure to give a big ol' smack to that like button, subscribe, drop a comment letting me know what you think of Naruto, this review, or a manga series I should read in the future. We got a bunch of crazy videos on deck. I'm currently reading Vagabond, and it's really crazy. I mean, I've just been churning through pretty much every chapter on a daily basis. With all that being said and done, though, that about wraps it up, and I will see you guys in the next video.